Dad really liked my sister, but she turned him down. I picked my brother to walk me down the aisle, and I saw karma hit him hard. Dad wanted to walk my sister down the aisle first, but she picked our stepdad, so he didn't do it for me. Dad is crying and begs me to let him talk. I've never been a very angry person, but I do like it when karma is clear, which is what has happened. It doesn't bother me if that makes me a bad person or a bad kid. The whole thing makes me happy and cocky at the same time. I am so happy that justice has finally been done after years and years of pain and mental abuse. As I've grown up, my dad has made me feel bad. Suddenly he thinks of his daughter, whom he never really liked in the first place. He is alone and can't count on anyone else. My name is F31, and I am the middle child of 3. Finn, F29, is my bigger brother, and Sarah, F29, is my younger sister. For most of my childhood, I grew up in a happy home. At least my mom. Even though my parents had their own ideas, F59 did her best to be a fair parent. My dad, M65, is not in the same situation. His acts made it clear that he was favoring some people. Sarah was his favorite person, and since Finn was the son, he felt like he had a link with him. They could talk about manly things. I wasn't a part of this, of course. It began when they were very young. There was always a feeling in me that my dad didn't think much of me. I tried a few different ways to say it. I was a tough kid in general, so maybe by throwing fits, but nothing I did ever got his attention. With age, I learned to accept it. I think Mom tried to make up for his favoritism after she saw it. I have always loved her for seeing me because if it were up to my dad, I would have been unseen my whole life. Mom tried her best to be a fair mom, but she wasn't perfect, as I already said. She loved and treated all of us the same. Finn may have noticed that she tried to make sure I didn't feel left out. He tried to fill in after noticing that I was forgetful and distant. Dad would let Finn teach me how to change car tires, and he would ask me to come along. He made sure I was there when Dad taught him how to drive. I know it was my dad because he didn't include me in the chats. I did not go through abuse or anything like that. If they gave them to us, we got similar gifts. For instance, I got the same number of new clothes as either Sarah or Finn. Dad, on the other hand, never gave me any moral support. Mom and Finn tried to fill that hole in my life the whole time. Sarah, on the other hand, thoroughly loved her part as the young princess. The way she behaved as a child made her school worry about a number of things. All of those fears were not taken into account in some way. She grew up to be a very needy and cocky young woman. Because of this, I'm not really close to her. Finn and I are very close, and he can't stand Sarah. Dad is the only one who doesn't bother with how she acts. Mom doesn't put up with her either. This is how things are right now. Mom and Dad broke up a few years ago. No one has told us the real reason for the friendly split. We all know that Mom and Dad are not telling the truth when they say they are no longer suitable. The real cause is something else. I am sure it was cheating because they didn't start meeting anyone new for a long time after the split. Mom and Dad have always wanted us to not know the truth. I didn't have to worry about child rights because we were all adults at the time. They've mostly gotten along well since then. Since, let's be honest, there's no love lost, I've chosen to spend as little time as possible with my dad. He hasn't said anything bad about my departure, so I guess it works for both of us. When I have free time, I usually go to my mom's house. Finn and Sarah, on the other hand, spend similar amounts of time at both places. Sometimes Finn and I plan trips to Mom's house, but Sarah and I only go with her during Christmas. Finn can't stand her at all. When looked at from the outside, we seem pretty normal and useful. I'm glad that things have gone badly this time, though. Mom has been seeing Arthur, M60, for 5 years now. When they met a yoga vacation, they hit it off right away. I enjoy being with Arthur, and he's a cool guy. He is nice to Finn and me and never tries to go too far. Since no one has ever brought it up, and I don't see any reason for him to be mean to Sarah. From what I can tell, things are fine between them. It's only important that Mom is happy. Even though Arthur's dad is very mean to him, the two get along fine. It's likely because Dad doesn't have a stable partner and hasn't had much luck with other women. In addition, Mom's life is much better than her life with Dad. Arthur also makes a lot more money than his dad. Even though we're all happy for Mom, I think Dad is really mad about it all. Another thing Arthur doesn't like is that we get along well with him. Even though Finn tries to explain that none of us are replacing him, and that we are just acting like responsible adults, Dad still acts jealous. Everything about it is rude and stupid. I don't have to deal with a lot of it though, because I don't see my dad very often. The way the family works right now is as follows. To understand what's been going on over the last few days, you need to know what happened before. Kieran, M34, asked me to marry him a few months ago. We've had a lot of time together. Because I like to keep things private, I didn't tell everyone right away about the proposal. Once Kieran and I decided on a date, we told our families because we wanted to get married as soon as possible rather than wait a long time to get married. The wedding is set for next week. When I told my family, they had mixed feelings. Arthur was happy, and Finn and his mum were over the moon. Sarah looked pretty upset, but Dad didn't say much in response. All of this happened on a video call, and I could see that she quickly stopped it after making an effort to smile. I thought she might throw a fit because she hates not being the center of attention, but I couldn't stand her acting at that moment. I told Finn that I wanted him to walk me down the aisle instead of my dad, and I called him separately to talk about it. He didn't say anything for a while and then said that he was touched by my request, but thought it was wrong to do so, because Dad would make a big deal out of it. He said that even though he really wanted to, he couldn't because he didn't want to bother his dad. I was hurt by, is what he said. Having been my male guardian more than my dad, he knew I needed him to be there with me. I told him I had come to him because my dad had let me down more than once. I didn't disagree with Finn because I also thought he was making sense. A lot of feelings were expressed. He told me softly that it didn't matter if he walked me down the aisle. It was important for my day to go as smoothly as possible so that I could remember it with happiness and no anger. He said that if he were to take over Dad's job, Dad would be upset during the wedding and ruin the day and the memories for me. He was right. I was sure that what Finn said would at least make my day easier, and I was sure that Dad would be able to pull off such a trick. Finn told me to talk to my dad about it. I told him I would think about it, and that I didn't want him to walk me down the aisle. Luckily, Sarah and Zach, her boyfriend, said they were getting married 2 weeks later. I knew she would try to steal the show at my wedding or do something else after we looked at each other. I tried to resist, but I couldn't. Finn was also not happy. We both knew what time it was, but there was nothing we could do about it, so we didn't say anything. One good thing about this is that Sarah's wedding is set for 5 weeks from now, which is 1 month after mine. She had hoped to be the first bride in her family, but the stars didn't line in her favor, so she had to be happy being the second bride. I didn't give in to her attempts to make me put off my wedding, even though she was mad about it. It was time for her to grow up because I wasn't the type to give in to her tantrums. In this way, nothing changed. I think Dad and Sarah decided that he would walk Sarah down the aisle before he did the same for me. I'm not sure how they thought of such a strange idea. They must have thought I wouldn't get married or would get married later, because I never had much luck with boys in school or college. Anyway, when Sarah told everyone she was getting married, I asked my dad to walk me down the aisle. He told me in a sad voice that he had promised his child that he would go with her first. He said he would keep that promise years ago, when she was on her deathbed, but it never happened. He couldn't break his promise and make her sad, so he couldn't walk me down the aisle. I was really happy because I didn't want him to walk me down the aisle in the first place. Being sad and hurt was making me dance inside. I promised him that I would honor his promise to Sarah, even if it hurt, which it didn't. I called Finn right away to let him know what was going on. He didn't like his dad. Finn told me that he would have jumped at the chance to walk down the aisle with me right away if he had known my dad would act this way. He told me that if Dad could, I could give this opportunity to any girl I wanted. I was too happy to care if Finn was mad at his dad. Everything worked out just the way I wanted it to, and I'm so happy. Even though planning a wedding was stressful, everything was going well. Until yesterday, when drama I had never experienced before happened in my life, drama I wasn't ready for. Even though I was worried and jittery, everything seemed to be in order. Sarah told her dad last night that he wasn't going to the wedding with her. Arthur was asked to do it instead. This caught all of us by surprise. She also told everyone about it through a video call. It was mean of her, and she could have been nicer about it. We all knew how excited Dad was about her wedding. He had even paid for the whole honeymoon because she and her fiancé wanted to save money. My dad had pretty much shut down from my life. Mom and Dad were busy setting up 2 weddings. Since he was only thinking about Sarah, he didn't have anything to say or suggest, and he kept ignoring anything that had to do with my wedding. Additionally, he had not contributed any money to my wedding. My friend Kieran and I paid for it ourselves. It got to the point where I trusted Mom and Arthur's advice more than Dad's. On the other hand, Arthur was fully involved in getting ready for my wedding. Because of this, Arthur seemed shocked by Sarah's request, or rather, demand, and didn't know what to do. When Mom finally told him that he would love to do it, Arthur just stared at her. That was one of the worst calls I've ever been on. I work in business, so bad calls happen all the time. Dad was upset. He swore at Arthur instead of talking to Sarah about it, and then he hung up. That was it. My friends and family asked my dad how he was doing, but I didn't. I hung up the phone quickly because I needed to think about something else. In any case, this wasn't my issue. He didn't want to break the promise he had made to Sarah. If she broke it, it was just between them. I had no plans or wants to step in. They were able to work it out between themselves. At this point, I didn't want to get involved in small family issues. I didn't know it would soon be really annoying me. Dad called me last night in tears, just a few hours after his little girl hurt him so badly. He was crying and telling me that he was sorry he turned down my offer to walk me down the aisle at this very moment. What I heard shocked me. It was crazy how arrogant they were. I told him in a gentle way that it was between him and Sarah, even though I felt bad about what had happened. It had nothing to do with my plans for my wedding. I told him that we had already decided months before, and that Finn would be walking me down the aisle, so I also told him that I couldn't make a change at the last minute. He said he would talk to Finn, telling me I didn't have to worry about Finn's argument because Finn was just a stand-in for him. Not that he agreed, but I told him I didn't want to hurt Finn. Dad didn't need to know that I didn't want him to be my dad. I told Dad that there would be no change, even though he insisted that he talk to Finn and make things right. Finn had to walk me down the aisle as the last step. He was totally delusional when he thought I was fighting because Finn wouldn't quit. He was sure he could get Finn to change his mind. I called Finn right away to let him know what was going on after I hung up. To say that Finn was angry would be an understatement. When he asked me what I wanted, I told him that I had. I always wanted him to be the one to tell everyone who I was. I asked my dad first because he told me to, and he was the only one who was against it. That's what I said when Finn asked if I was sure I wanted him to walk me down the aisle. Then he told me not to worry because if my dad called, he would tell him off, so I shouldn't. I told Finn that I didn't want any trouble at the wedding and that his dad needed to understand that he couldn't just show up whenever he wanted and use me as a fall-in daughter. It made me feel better that Finn would make sure Dad knew about the changes that would be made to the wedding plans. One of them and I haven't talked since last night. I'm having so much stress about it. I really don't have the energy to deal with all of this chaos right now, when things were going well. I'm not sure if I should call them or wait until I know what happened between Finn and Dad. Finn may or may not have talked to him yet, I'm not sure. I don't know what to do because the stress is making me sick. Change 1. Finn and I finally talked and now things are even worse than I thought they would be. I won't have to worry about anything because he took care of most of it. Finn said he thought his dad would call him to talk about the supposed change in plans, but the call never came. Finn knew at that point that Dad wasn't going to say anything. Dad thought that because he had chosen to walk me down the aisle, everyone else must have agreed. Dad didn't call Finn for a day, so Finn called him. He asked Dad if things had changed because I had told him something. To make things seem less formal, Dad said that I had asked him to walk me down the aisle since Sarah would not be there anymore. Now, Finn is usually polite. He is the calmer and more sensible of the three of us. What shocked me was hearing that he went crazy over Dad. Finn said that he told Dad to stop being so rude because they both knew I hadn't asked him to walk me down the aisle. Dad had instead begged for the part after his beloved daughter turned him down. This made Dad very angry. He often acts fiercely when he hears the truth or something he doesn't want to hear. But Finn told Dad to stop talking and listen for a while so he wouldn't get in the way. Finn told Dad that he should be happy that he was even getting an invitation to my wedding because of how he had treated me over the years. Then Finn calmed down. He later told me he felt bad about snapping at Dad, especially since the wedding was coming up, but he said he couldn't help it. Finn wished for Dad to take off the mask and see who he really was. Finn told his dad that he had always liked Sarah more than him and had only tried to get along with Finn, but he never thought about me. Besides that, he brought up the fact that I had asked Finn to walk me down the aisle. At first, I only asked my dad because Finn kept asking. Finn explained that he had thought Dad would use the chance to start fixing things with us, but Dad blew the chance. Finn said that his kids didn't like or value their dad and that they thought he was a bad parent. It didn't matter to him that Finn wasn't a fair dad. I didn't respect him because he never tried to love me or treat me like his daughter. Sarah didn't respect him either, because if she did, she wouldn't have played the joke she did. Finn went on to say that Sarah's cocky attitude came from her dad. He had been giving her a lot of care for years and now had to deal with the consequences. Finn said that since Dad had been throwing out his other kids since they were babies, it made sense for his favorite kid to throw out his favorite kid. Finn told me that he had spoken more, but he didn't remember everything because he had been so angry that he had yelled, following a tough wake-up call. He told me that I didn't need to worry about Dad being up to no good. If he did, Finn would take care of it right away. He wouldn't change the fact that he was going to walk me down the aisle. I was very thankful that he said sorry for all the trouble so close to the wedding. I've never been so strong in defense before. I always thought that Dad might not love me because I did something wrong. Over the years, I tried to get over that feeling, but I never was able to. This was the first time I ever thought someone would stand up for me. It was my brother. My mom should have stood up for me when we were kids, but she didn't. She never fought with Dad. She tried to make up for the loss of love in her own way, though. I thought I would never be able to tell him how bad he was to me because of how shy and respectful she was of him, but I don't blame her for that. That changed, though, because my brother loved me so much that he couldn't stand the thought of me going through this. When I told him that this was the nicest thing anyone had ever done for me, I started to choke up. By the time he was done telling the story, I was crying. It has to be the best thing that could ever happen. But I don't think Finn really knows how bad what he's done is. Second news, I'm now married. In fact, Kieran and I just got married a few days ago and are now on our honeymoon in Thailand. Even though there was trouble before the wedding, everything went smoothly. Dad couldn't walk any of his daughters down the aisle, and Finn wasn't giving up. Things are getting really bad now. Father was mostly afraid about how his large family would feel about him if he didn't go to both of his children's weddings. He kept talking about this with Finn while they were talking. In a direct way, Finn told him again that he was mentally checked out with me anyway, so he wasn't going to be a father at my wedding. Finn told him to say thanks for the offer in the first place. Dad didn't know what was wrong with Sarah because she was his favorite. No one really knows why she did what she did. Sarah called me when she heard and said it was unfair to Dad, and that I wanted him to walk me down the aisle instead of her, because she couldn't. I told her to get a life because she was using her Dad's money to pay for her wedding and had kicked him out. I told her that I had gone to see my dad and that he had chosen to walk her down the aisle because she had made a stupid promise that she couldn't keep. You could change things at her wedding if she felt that her beloved father's pain made her feel bad. Because she was upset about her dad, I told her Arthur would understand and that I could even talk to him for her. The call was over because she had nothing else to say. I called Finn and told him I didn't want to deal with any more father issues. It was his job to make sure I was done with this crap if it came to me. That was the last thing I wanted to do that day. I had 100 other things to be happy or worried about. Because he had made me unhappy for most of my life, I couldn't let him ruin my most important day. Finn told me not to worry because he would take care of everything. There's no way to describe how nervous I was on my wedding day, but luckily everything went pretty well. Even though Dad looked pretty sad, I'm glad he didn't try to start a fight. I was having too much fun after a while to think about his pouty face much. They didn't get along, and Sarah tried to stay away from Dad as much as possible, but I didn't mind. They were able to keep the wedding from going wrong, which makes me happy. As Finn led me down the aisle, I could feel my dad staring back at me with a mean look, but that was all he could do. I've been told that Dad has to fix the problems caused by some people asking why Finn was up there instead of him. So that's his cross to carry. It's important to me that Sarah's wedding is over so that I can live a peaceful life without any trouble. Unfortunately, I will not be able to talk to Dad again for a while. After her wedding, I don't see a reason to keep in touch with him anyway. Change 2. Sarah got married yesterday. I wouldn't know how the wedding went because she didn't invite Kieran and me. Even though I didn't understand what she was doing, I was happy to watch. Mom, Arthur, and Dad were the only ones there. Finn did not go, which made her sad. It was said that her dad hoped she would change her mind at the last minute and ask him to walk her down the aisle, but that never happened. It was pretty bad, and the pictures she showed made it clear that Arthur would much rather be somewhere else. Mom is done, Dad is sad, and Arthur is feeling uncomfortable. Besides that, her wedding went well, but I don't really care. My mom called me to give you these information. Of course, Dad is upset because he was hoping that one of us would give in and let him do what he wants. However, his personal life is a mess right now, and all of his children don't talk to him much. It's not important to me that he's not going well with it. I really think it serves him right for being such a bad dad and letting me have a terrible childhood, even though he helped make it happen. I'm done with him. It's not okay for Sarah's or his evil to hurt this new part of my life or my new family. They're gone from my life, and I'm glad.